Hey, this is Jeff Lorber, American keyboardist, composer, and record producer, and you're watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. Hope you dig it.
Wow. What can I say about that? What we've just watched? It is incredible. We've just witnessed our special guest tonight on Jazz Across the Pond, a Grammy award-winning keyboardist, composer, producer. Over the course of 40 years plus, he has got a plethora of albums. When I say plethora, there's too many to hold in one hand. Of his CDs. They really are an incredible collection, and they take pride and place on my wall of CDs over here. He is a pioneer of post-fusion sound, of contemporary jazz with his radio-friendly groove that's oriented instrumental music, a true bastion of the jazz world. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me? Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined. Ladies and gentlemen, the man himself, Mr. Jeff Lorber.
Thank you. Wow. It's hard to live up to all that. I usually have people tell me.
I'm glad Roger didn't. Go, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No,
I was going to say.
Wow.
I'm sitting back. Go.
I'll go. No, I was just going to say, I'm used to people telling me I have all your albums. I have Water Sign and Wizard Island. You know, it's like, okay, well, I'm glad you got them all. That's pretty good.
Well, I was worried that when Roger enunciated, I was so concerned when I realized he was going to call you a bastion. I thought,
as long as you pronounce that right.
Yes.
So anyway, Jeff, thank you so much for taking time out to come and join us on our show. And we've got a lot to get through. Let's start straight off. So Jeff Lorber, born November the 4th, 1952. I got a feeling you got a big, nice birthday coming up very, very soon.
Yeah. It reminds me that I'm getting old, I guess. But it's better than the alternative.
Older, not old.
You were born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and if our researchers have done their correct work, because they're usually really, really, pretty good, you started to play the piano at the age of 4 years old. And after playing a number of R&B bands as a teenager, you then went to attend the Berklee College of Music, where you developed your love for jazz. I think we're right in also saying your elder sisters were into the Beatles and that, and you're like, well, okay, that's pretty good. I quite like this, all this stuff. So, Jeff, would you please tell us more about your childhood in Philadelphia and your introduction to music, sir?
Well, my mother was an accomplished piano player, and she used to play in the evening when I was kind of drifting off to sleep. I'd hear her practicing and playing, the stuff that she liked to play, which was kind of romantic music, Gershwin and Debussy and things like that. Very flowery, very pretty music to go to sleep by. And I had two sisters that were taking lessons, so everybody was having so much fun with music. I wanted to get in on it, and back then families were a lot closer, at least our family was. And I had a lot of cousins, and they we'd get together, and I had some cousins that were really into folk music. Like my sister Betty was really a big Bob Dylan fan, and Joan Baez, she just loved that stuff. Took me a few years to develop an appreciation for that. But I had one cousin named Stuart that was a big jazz fan, and he had a drum set in the basement of his house. And so my favorite thing was to go over there, and he would let me play the drums, which every kid loves to play a drum set. And he had a bunch of Blue Note albums, and that were set up where he could play the turntable that was upstairs, and it would play on a speaker downstairs, and he could jam to it. So that was really fun. The other cousins were more into the folk music thing, and I just wasn't really feeling that so much. But I'm glad I got turned on to some good music from that cousin. Then I had another cousin that actually showed me some stuff on the piano, and he gave me 3 albums, one of which was Monk's Dream, which became my favorite. And another one was McCoy Tyner, ballads by McCoy. It was blues and ballads. That was a little too much for a young kid. But the other one was My Fair Lady, Andre Previn trio. And I quite like that one too. I still listen to that one once in a while. So I listen to those a lot over, and you know how it is when you have a record and you're a kid and that's all you got. But
well, Jeff, it's interesting when we look at your bio. I mean, obviously you're an American Grammy Award-winning keyboardist, composer, arranger, and record producer, as Roger had mentioned. But you've been erroneously tagged as being, and I've read this in a couple of places, a pioneer of the smooth jazz genre. Now, as a longtime follower of your music, I don't agree with that assessment. I mean, I've been playing your music on my show, The New Jazz Train, from the beginning back in 2011. And when I play your music, I describe you as being one of the earliest pioneers of post-fusion jazz, because you've effectively blended elements of funk, R&B, rock, and electric jazz. And you continue to push contemporary jazz to new heights. Now, as I mentioned to you in our little pre-call, we had a chance to talk before we went live. I'm only 7 years younger than you are. I mean, 7 months younger than you are. So we've heard rock and roll, pop, soul, funk, R&B. We've heard samba, disco, and of course, we went through acid jazz, fusion jazz, electric jazz. We heard big band jazz. We know straight ahead jazz. Now, to muddy the waters even more, your 7 Grammy nominations have fallen in 4 different categories.
Right, there's that.
Been nominated for Best Contemporary Instrumental Album, Best Pop Instrumental Album, Best Contemporary Jazz Album, and Best R&B Instrumental Performance. So now, we'd like to have that definitive answer. How would you describe your distinctive sound, and what genres have been the most influential for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, music, all these labels for different styles of music, that's something that, radio formats love to pigeonhole everything. Musicians just like to play good music, period, wherever it's coming from. And they're less interested in the labels. But, I was lucky in that I grew up at a time where there was a lot of great music, and a music that was changing very radically. And not only music, but musical instruments, like the advent of synthesizers, when people started doing with electric guitars and studio techniques. And so in terms of where the Jeff Lorber Fusion fits into that jazz, contemporary jazz or traditional jazz continuum, I'd say that, the stuff that I was listening to, that I was really influenced by, were bands like the Crusaders, Weather Report, Chick Corea, Return to Forever, John McLaughlin. What else? Just R&B music. Definitely Earth, Wind and Fire and James Brown and Tower of Power were a big influence. And so I think what happened was you had groups like the Cannonball Adderley group. They would add like a guitar player that would just be a white guy with a fuzz tone that would just play some stuff on top of the music. And Miles was doing that too, to some extent, although in a little hipper way, eventually with, having John Scofield and Mike Stern get into the band. But I think there was, after those early groups that were just so wildly experimental in so many different directions, there was like a new kind of music that came out, and I think my group and Spyro Gyra and Pat Metheny kind of
Oh,
epitomize like a sort of melodic
Mhm.
music that in a way was instrumental pop or instrumental R&B or something like that, something that was more like popular music with melodies that you could really follow and you could really get into, but with jazz vocabulary, bebop vocabulary as far as the solo content and the changes, and then all these other exciting things that you were talking about, such as R&B rhythms, Latin rhythms,
Mhm.
and so it was just like a new generation of musicians that came out that incorporated what came before in a more where all those influences were sort of more thoroughly mixed up and kind of expressed in a way that I think was more commercially viable in a certain sense,
Right.
and still fun to play, and it still had the feeling of exploration and excitement that jazz has always had,
yeah.
and it
Well,
should have.
well, a brilliant answer. Now let's take you back a little bit, because it was in 1982 you recorded your first solo album. It was called It's a Fact. And there it
Right.
was, the great album. Play that very frequently, of course. And it explored your R&B roots with a smoother and a synth feel to it, a heavy synth sound to it. The album also featured new backing contributions from Kenny G and Pauliana DaCosta. I mean,
Right.
two amazing names on that one there. It's a Fact also contains several songs with vocalists and a stark contrast from the instrumental recordings. Now, the album's progressed right the way through there. But if you were to look back, how is your first album, presumably you still play it and you still have fond memories of your first album,
Mm-hmm.
how has it developed then right through to your most recent albums? What changes? Is it primarily, is it your taste in music, or is it the actual instruments? Because of course synthesizers developed tremendously since 1982. What
Yeah,
is
that's true. Although, they've developed, but the synthesizers back in the earlier days were sort of more, they required the people that operating them to contribute more. Like now you get these synthesizers that have a million cool patches in it, and you just call up the patch and you play it. You got a harp, you got a string section, you got an electric piano. Like back in the early days, I had a patch cord Moog 15 that you couldn't even get any noise out of it at all unless you really studied it and you kind of got into it and figured out how it worked. So in a certain way, the idea of synthesizers was more exciting back in those days than it is now. Now everybody's kind of got the same stuff, and they're what are known as romplers, which means it's like waveforms that are in RAM, read only memory, and you play a key, and that's what you get. Bam, there's the sound in memory.
It's sorry, I was going to say it's because I used to work in the music shops. I used to say in the early 80s, I was selling a synthesizer. And when Roland came out with the Juno 6, and all the musicians, everyone was buying it. But unfortunately, then everybody had the same sound. All the bands, there was nobody exploring any further with it until Yamaha came out with something in that.
Right, but even those early Roland Junos were way more could be customized to the individual's taste a lot more than the stuff they have now, because you could move the filter around, you can move the envelopes around, you could get sounds that were more personalized, although I'm sure lots of people were really happy to just pull the thing out and play the first thing that came out of it. But to be honest with you, I think if you check out the records that happened from my very first album, the Jeff Lorber Fusion, Soft Space, Water Sign, Wizard Island, that's what came next. I think those four records showed a lot of growth and a lot of sort of kind of finding my musical identity and really developing that. And unfortunately, after that, I think, I don't know if I think a lot of good music were on the records that I made after that, but they sort of missed something. Something was missing because all of a sudden the record company was more interested in hearing stuff that was commercial and you know, I sort of lost my way a little bit, to be honest with you, I think, compared to those first records or those first 5 records. And I think later on, when, you know, like after many years, when I came back in 1994 with Worth Waiting For, and the records that followed that, I sort of, you know, began to really appreciate the idea of the Jeff Lorber fusion as sort of a somewhat steady band. You know, the core band has been Jimmy Haslip and Gary Novak on drums for the last I don't know how many records, and to just really appreciate being able to be creative and expressive in that area of instrumental music that, you know, kind of like what I described earlier of bebop kind of solos and but still that, you know, things that reflect the time that we're in. I'm listening to new music, and when I hear stuff that really appeals to me, I try to incorporate some of those ideas in what I'm writing.
Excellent.
Well, you know, we brought up a lot of names of people that you've been associated with. Your list of guest artists and featured artists has been phenomenal. You've mentioned Jimmy Haslip, of course, Chick-Corea, Joe Farrell, Stanley Clarke, Freddie Hubbard, Mike Stern. You've already mentioned him, Larry Kuntz. You had the great late Chuck Loeb, Everett Harp, Jimmy Brandley, Ray Brecker, Lenny Castro, Paul Jackson Jr. You've mentioned Eric Marienthal, Dave Mann, Michael Thompson. You've mentioned Novak, Jean-Luc Ponty,
Yeah,
Bob Mintzer, Robin Ford, Adam Hawley, and Andy Snitzer. And that's
yeah,
just a small list. But over the years, I mean, you've had tremendous success as a soloist and with your 2 supergroups, the Jeff Lorber Fusion and also Jazz Funk Soul. And of course, that list is just phenomenal. But when we look at that overall list, and you've kind of spoken about Jimmy a little bit, there are 4 individuals that have been tremendous bandmates with you and have been instrumental as you drive your music to the forefront of contemporary jazz. Jimmy Haslip, first and foremost, who I guess we could say that he was kind of breathed a little bit of life into the resurrection of the Jeff Lorber Fusion.
absolutely,
I was so
absolutely.
happy when he left the Yellow Jackets, one of my favorite bands. You guys started collaborating, and then
Yeah,
that kind of was the genesis. But also the late great Chuck Loeb with
yep,
Jazz Funk Soul. He was one of the founding members of the group,
yep.
as well as was Everett Harp and then Paul Jackson Jr. Those 4 people, not to say that everybody else didn't weigh mightily on your
Hmm.
success, but when you went through that kind of transition period, not that you had lost your way, but you were just looking for a way to kind of reinvent, like with Jazz Funk Soul, that was a recreation of things from the past. But tell us a little bit more about your 2 supergroups and also those 4 individuals in particular.
Well, you know, so my other career, my day job is as like a songwriter and producer with a lot of different people. So that's, you know, I guess in the late '80s through the mid '90s, I just really immersed myself in the studio scene, and I was lucky enough to be, for a time, kind of one of the first call session musicians that
Mhm.
played on a lot of records, especially a lot of R&B records. And I got to work with a lot of my heroes. I worked with El DeBarge, and you know, I even worked with U2 on the Rattle and Hum album. I worked with all kinds of people, and that was really a learning experience, and it was really fun, and really I sort of threw my solo career behind there between those years, and just really focused on the studio thing, and that's so that's why a lot of those names that you mentioned come up. Another like one of my real favorite people that I work with, well, besides Michael Franks, that's one, and Herb Alpert, but
Mhm.
Renee and Angela, they just had the coolest approach to songwriting and chord changes, and Angela in particular, I just really fell in love with her approach to chord changes, and enjoyed working with them very, very much. um so what was the question again? Sorry about that.
No, I mean, that's exactly what we
Oh,
were looking
oh,
Yeah.
for.
I remember you were talking about yeah, working with, well, Paul and I go way back. So when I first moved
Yes.
to LA in 1980, we hooked up, and we had a band actually with John Roberts, I'm sorry, John Robinson, and Nathan East. It was called Spur of the Moment. We played around town, And I've used Paul tremendously
Oh,
on all
yes.
of the records that I've made as a solo artist, as Jeff Lorber Fusion, and also, well, as Jazz Funk Soul, of course. And his records, I got to, I worked with him a lot. Like I guess one of the big successes that I had was very early in my career as a studio musician. I started working with Richard Perry, and I arranged the song "Rhythm of the Night" for DeBarge, which included Dan Huff, Paul Jackson Jr. on guitar, and John Robinson on drums. So that was really a big moment that led to a lot of things from there. But yeah, so we go way back, and we're super tight. In fact, he's coming over here in a few minutes to rehearse for a gig we have with Jazz Funk Soul next week.
Cool.
And then it was very lucky to meet and work with Chuck Loeb. What an incredible talent, what a great musician, and what a super nice guy too. He was just one of the sweetest guys.
Yeah.
And it was
And
fun.
a prolific composer too.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Jazz Funk Soul, sometimes like Everett and I can kind of butt heads a little bit because we're both pretty type A personalities. And Chuck would always like step in and kind of be the peacemaker and like help work things out so nothing would get too heated.
Now,
But yeah, what a great talent. And we miss him so much. We always talk about him. I mean, everybody who knew him. I mean, we're all like so saddened by his passing, but we always remember him all the time because he was just an incredible talent.
I agree. Now, I know Kevin is very keen. We're going to be breaking the interview for a minute to play a track. But before you do, you were talking about Michael Franks. And of course, in the 70s, Michael Franks always used Joe Sample, which was Joe Sample, of course, of the Crusaders. It all seems the connection just seems to be interweaving into that and the rest of it. So it's amazing what happened there. But just prior to playing this track, of course, apart from your amazing production and session work with artists such as, Dave Koz. Now, we've mentioned Jimmy Hasler, we've mentioned Nathan East. These are all former guests on our show. So any followers who are watching this going, I want more of this. Well, these are all guests that have appeared on our show, and we're very proud of that. Let me just very, very quickly, of course, on Herb Albert. You've done some great work there as well. We've alluded to that. But of course, the critically acclaimed 1997 PlayStation game, Castlevania. Very quickly, can you just bring us up? We got games going, what? Very quickly, can you tell us about that, sir?
Well, there's not much to tell. When you're a studio musician, you kind of take whatever comes along. And there was a lady from Japan that I did some collaborating with, Rika Morinaka, I believe her name was. And we did a bunch of different things. Actually, one of my favorite things that I did with her is I worked with Kool Moe Dee on a song for some kind of like Sesame Street kind of educational thing where we did a song about the ABCs with Kool Moe Dee. It's super funky. With I think Gerald Albright played on it too. So I'll have to send you that so you can hear that.
Please do.
But
That's
anyway,
really
I've worked on a few movies too. That's not something that I've done a lot of, but video games, that was probably it for me, that one thing. Because I don't remember hardly ever working on video games. Now that's like a thing that a lot of musicians are very involved in. It's just if you're into film scoring, you're working in video games too usually. But yeah, so there's not much to say, but I'll have to send you the Kool Moe Dee alphabet song.
All right. Well, before we delve into two of Jeff's latest projects, we're going to take a little break to listen to the title track from the Jeff Lorber Fusion's exceptional 2021 project, Space Time. It's a great track. Let's check it out together, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. We've been listening to the title track from Jeff Lorber Fusion's 2021 project Space Time, featuring Jimmy Haslip and Michael Landau, Gary Novak, Hubert Laws, Bob Mincer, David Mann, Gary Meek, Paul Jackson Jr., Robin Ford, and Gerald Albright. That unto itself is an incredible lineup. Now, Jeff, over the last 7 years, the Jeff Lorber Fusion has picked up 6 spots on Billboard's year-ending charts, while Jazz Funk Soul has picked up 2. So you've picked up 8 spots in 7 years, and that's a pretty impressive track record and achievement.
Nice.
You've also received 7 Grammy nominations, and you've won the Best Contemporary Instrumental Album Award at the 60th Annual Grammy Awards for your 2017 Jeff Lorber Fusion project, Prototype. Now, Roger's kind of mentioned it. Your first Grammy nomination was in 1985. So I would think it would be safe to say that for most musicians, receiving a Grammy nomination would be the pinnacle of their career. So knowing you got your first nomination back in 1985, over the course of the last 37 years since receiving your first Grammy nomination, what has been the inspiration that keeps your creative juices flowing?
Well, I mean, I just love music. I think, I think musicians are sort of a different breed of human being. You just love music. You just want to be around it. You want to be involved with it. You're just drawn to it. You want to know everything you can about it. And, most people I know that are professional musicians, they grew up in their family where they were sort of the oddball of the family, that all they wanted to do was practice guitar all day or practice piano all day. Actually, I have to say, like, one thing that sort of helped me out in my career a little bit, I think, was the fact that there was this like big area where all the kids lived real close together, and we lived kind of a little bit farther than that. It was a little more of a hassle for me to get together with all the kids and play with them. So I think just growing up in a place where it was just as easy to go over to the piano and spend my afternoon doing that than hanging out with my friends, that probably helped me out a little bit. But yeah, I think musicians are just a different breed of people, and they love it. They can't get enough. And I'm very, very grateful. I've had a career that allows me to spend my time making music, and I have so much fun doing all the different things that I do in terms of writing. I mean, I love to write, and producing, and working with different artists, and it's really fun too, having the Jeff Lorber Fusion as a trio, and being able to do those kind of gigs with my own music, and then also for having being able to play like bigger festivals and bigger venues with Jazz Funk Soul. So that's really a nice thing to have kind of 2 different groups that I'm in that allow me to kind of express myself in different ways, and with Jazz Funk Soul, there's a lot less pressure because, we all share the work in terms of when we make a record, each of us have to only write 3 or 4 songs instead of 10. And working with on stage with Paul and Everett, those guys are such amazing soloists and players that makes my life a lot easier compared to the trio thing. But I really enjoy the trio thing, and we've been doing that a bit lately with Lenny Castro on percussion, which has really been fun. And so I'm just that's about all I can say. Is I just love music. I love all kinds of music. I'm always looking for inspiration. I listen to Spotify, like New Music Friday. It's hard to find stuff that I really like, to be honest with you, but I'm always on the look for things that I can be inspired by.
Right. Well, that actual, what you're just saying there leads very nicely into my next one, because I believe that we found out that smooth jazz, you feel that smooth jazz is more a marketing term than a musical category. You were once quoted as saying, while I'm grateful for the format provided a platform for modern instrumental music, I was doing your music way before that term smooth jazz was ever invented. Your music intersects with some of the most characteristics of smooth jazz, but your music has always been very melodic. It's always been funky, and with a definition of soloing, and with the attention more on the soloing aspect. It represents something more ambitious, more jazzy, more compelling than the word smooth jazz itself. Now, am I correct in saying that's one of your quotes?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, because I think smooth, what happened with smooth jazz is somebody came up with that. It was like another way of saying this is like jazz, but not the stuff that you hate. It's going to be stuff that you like.
Right.
That's that's kind of like their way of saying that. It's like it's Grover Washington. It's like the more relaxing, funky, cool stuff, and it's not like the art ensemble of Chicago or something.
Mhm. That's funny.
Kevin.
Hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. Jeff, in other interviews, you've also mentioned jazz greats Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Horace Silver, one of my favorites, Bill Evans, McCoy Tyner, Wynton
Yeah,
Kelly, Red Garland, and of course the whole American Electric Drag supergroup Weather Report as major influences in
yeah.
your development. So, if you would, in a nutshell, what was it about those particular artists that struck such a deep chord for you?
Well, I think if you want to learn how to play jazz piano, it's really important to just kind of go back and study the history of it. And I remember being so knocked out. Like one record that really made a huge impact on me was Herbie Hancock's album, Fat Albert Rotunda, because that was his first sort of funky album.
Mm.
And back then, funk was like it wasn't really funk the way we think of funk now. It was more like what is that? Boogaloo. It's more like boogaloo. Like that was
Right.
sort of the kind of that was sort of the first type of funk that before real funk hit the
Or Maceo Parker.
right. Um, but that just made a huge impact on me. Mainly the way he was playing in those grooves. The way he played the Fender Rhodes and some of the things that he was playing. I mean, it was just like that's what I want to do. That's it right there. That's
Right.
what I really like that. And so that made a huge impression on me. And Chick Corea too, incredible stuff that he came up with. But really, you're not going to understand what those guys did unless you go back and unless you learn the history and you study, Bill Evans and Horace Silver. Like Horace Silver was really the guy, one of the first guys I could sort of really figure out what he was doing. It's a little
Right.
simpler and a little more bluesy and easier to figure out. And all those great piano players that play with Miles, Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, Tommy Flanagan.
Well, it's interesting. You
Love
bring
those
up
guys.
Chick Corea. You bring up Chick Corea in your arrangement of "Mysterious Traveler." That's like one of my. I know it's back in 2010, but that's still one of my favorite songs you've ever done.
Oh, thank you.
You didn't manhandle it. You didn't mangle it. You made it your own, and that's what was nice about it. But yeah, now is the time. Back in 2010.
Yeah, that's a pretty adventurous thing to do. We wanted to capture a little bit of the Way Out, vibe. So I put a wah-wah pedal on my Fender Rhodes, and we had sort of a live percussion session where Jimmy, who's actually a good percussionist, by the way, and another percussionist were in the studio together, kind of improvising to the track. So if I'm sure there's some things that you can hear, like some little places.
There's some nuance. There's definitely
Yeah,
some nuance there.
there's some interesting stuff. I mean, the Weather Report version, I think it's really, really long. It has like a really super long intro, and it's quite an huge epic piece of music. We didn't quite go there, but and we used to play that live, and it was really, really fun. So
Wow.
Yeah.
so that was and Michael Thompson, I think, contributed some fantastic stuff. He's an amazing
He's a great
musician.
guitarist.
He's done he's just done like phenomenal work to so many records that I worked on. It's like I feel like I'm so lucky to live here in LA and have access to all these people that you mentioned, because they're all just, I'm such fans of all of them, and they're all just brilliant. Michael Landau lives nearby, and I've had the pleasure of, over the years working with him on and off. I mean, he's absolutely a genius level musician. All these people, Hubert Laws in particular. And we had Hubert work with us recently. He's getting a little old. It's a little tougher. He's had some issues with his health and stuff. It's a little tougher for him to nail this stuff like he used to, but I think he did a really good job on the Space Time album. So we're really, really feel fortunate to have him involved.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal piccolo player too. People don't realize it, tend to associate him with flute, but piccolo is like his forte.
Yeah, the piccolo on the Jocko album.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's whatever song that was that he does like an amazing work on that on Jocko's debut album that Bobby Colomby produced.
Right.
Well, I know when I'm doing my radio show, if I ever play a track from his wonderful album Family from 1978 or 79, people ring up, they go, that is the most amazing album on that. And it's still incredible. You mentioned Pat Metheny. Now, Pat Metheny, of course, I'm a massive, huge fan of Pat Metheny, but he's always renowned for pushing the boundaries, not just getting into a stereotype. You know, the Pat Metheny group, everybody went found this, and he went, no, I'll tell you what, let's do this now. And it's very much like yourself. I mean, when we opened the show, I had all these handful of CDs, and whether it's Jeff Lou, your solo work, Kick It, or whether it's Midnight, or whether it's the hat that I mean, all so different and incredible. Where can our followers buy, download, purchase the hard copy? Where can they get it from, Jeff?
I guess Amazon. You guys have Amazon over there, right?
We do.
That's the place, I suppose. You know, if you're looking for the hard copies, you can still get them, pretty much. Luckily.
And what about tours? Where can people see you?
Well, I have a website called Lorber.com, and sorry for all those other Lorbers out there that I stole their website, but and I try to keep it up to date with the touring stuff. So that would be the best place to find that information. I'm hoping we could get over to you know, to Europe. It's been too long, and Southeast Asia too. You know, hopefully we'll get back to that kind of traveling again. I really enjoy that a lot.
Well, I know we would love to see you in the United Kingdom. We would be crying out to see you back on stage here.
Yeah, the people there are such big music fans. They know all the details of everything. So it's a different kind of, you know, music aficionado in the UK, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, we alluded to earlier on, but when you listen to your great jazz, the Jeff Lorber fusion, you certainly you can hear there's influences of the Earth, Wind and Fire, the Blood, Sweat and Tears, the Tower of Power, the Crusaders, with that lovely mixture of jazz, funk, R&B. The way you do it is just incredible, absolutely incredible, sir.
Well, thank you very much. You know, one of my secret ingredients is David Mann, who I've been working with for quite a while. And he's just a phenomenal sax player, phenomenal arranger, phenomenal producer. Like he delivers, like what he sends to me sounds so amazing. Just the way he records it and the way he organizes it. And so that's, you know, that's just something that adds like so much color and extra power and texture to the stuff that I've been doing over the last number of years.
Well, time unfortunately is running out, but I know we will be finishing off with a track. Kevin, do you want to talk about it? It's a wonderful album.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a great project, no question about it. As a matter of fact, that whole project is like dominating the charts right now. I mean, you've got 2 top 10 songs. You've got 4 songs that are all in the top 13 right now, or I should say, you've got a song and a project, because we have some that are album charts, some that are song charts. But you've got number 10 with Hustle, you've got number 10 with Forecast, number 12 with Hustle, and number 13 with Forecast, and that's Groove Jazz Music, Smooth Jazz Global, Billboard, and Radio Wave.
Wow!
So congratulations, Jeff, to you, to Everett, and to Paul Jackson Jr. as well. Outstanding project, and
thank you.
Keep doing it, brother.
All right, I'm gonna do my best. But thanks for listening, and pleasure to talk to you guys. You're so knowledgeable, and you know, you guys, you know, it's great. What you're doing is great, because it helps get the word out and helps give people more information about this music, which is pretty hard to find in the big picture of what's happening in the media.
That's true. That is so true.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know around about a year ago you were interviewed by Bola, the genie in Africa, and I listened to the interview and I sent him a message. I said, could you ask Jeff to see if he'd like to come on our show? And it's taken about a year, because you are such a busy man. You're in such demand now. So we thank you so much for taking time. I know you've got your rehearsal to go to now. So Jeff Lorber, thank you so much for joining us on our show.
My pleasure. You know, it's been, you know, we'll have to do this again and have part 2. Let me know when you want to do that.
All right.
Kevin, the last thing from you.
No, just Jeff again. I've been a longtime fan, and you were on my bucket list when Roger and I started this program. You were definitely one of those people that I wanted to interview. We started with Jimmy Haslip. He was our first interview together,
Wow.
and now we've got you. So I've kind of gotten a lot off my bucket list. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks once again. Thanks for what you guys are doing. Much appreciated.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, Kevin, myself, Mr. Jeff Lorber, take care. Look after yourself in this crazy world we live in. Look after yourself.
Yes. Thank you.